as I'm getting this together, so the live stream pauses. Yeah, there we go. All right. So welcome everybody. Talking Niagara this morning. It's July 17th. Hey, it's getting. We're what, in the third week of the kids' summer holidays?
Well, first of all, I'd like to give you a little lecture on tardiness, and
who's the one to talk about that?
Well, Peter, I thought your organization, between the two of us, your ability to be organized should have rubbed off on me. But my ability to be tardy is rubbing off on you.
Yeah, it's all your fault. It's all your fault, right? And just for anybody who's never heard of the word tardy, it means being late and slovenly.
Well, yeah, that's a good description of me. Yeah.
It's not just the late. It's not just the lateness. It's the fact you don't care about being late.
Well, in my case, it's just absent-minded and disorganization. Anyway,
I don't.
So yes, we are in the third week already.
Yeah.
Of our summer vacation. That seems to be fantastic. That we are moving.
Be annoying the kids, hasn't it? You know. I know when I would get to my third week of summer vacay, I'd be, what the heck is going on? What did I do? What did I ruin my time on? Because I'd look back and go, hey, I've done nothing.
Yes, sadly.
You know? Yeah.
Anyway, well, I haven't done much this summer yet. So I don't know what I will do. Maybe I will try to get out east.
You're not going to go sailing across the Atlantic again?
No, that's on hold for a while. The sailing I would hope to have done would be in the Mediterranean. Because my friend's boat's in Lisbon, sailboat there.
The interesting thing about sailing something in the Mediterranean, 90% of the time, the Mediterranean's pretty still, pretty calm, and then you get those days where the storms whip up a frenzy.
Yes, one of the reasons why European and North African civilization and Middle East civilization in and around the Mediterranean exploded was because of the easy transport of goods across the Mediterranean. East to west.
East to west, north to south, everywhere, and a lot of it. At one point, remember Egypt. The Egypt was actually the breadbasket of the world.
Yes, and during Cleopatra's time, Egypt was quite wealthy. Well, it had been wealthy for much of the time.
Yeah, it was wealthy for a long time, but yeah.
And North Africa too was the breadbasket of the Roman Empire. It's hard to believe that now if you ever go there now because of climate change has changed the whole area. But
you go down, if you fly down, have you ever flown down the Nile Valley? I have. It's interesting because it's a green strip. And you can see it from 35,000 foot. You can see this green strip meandering across the land, a brown landscape.
Well, yeah, you have you have a blue ribbon bounded by green, and then you have nothing but beige on either side of it, as far as the eye can see.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting how that, and of course. Well, we can get into that. We shouldn't, because I can go on for quite a while about that and bore the crap out of everybody that's listening.
All right. So Trump is putting on 17% tariffs on tomatoes from Mexico. And basically what's happening is there's been an agreement originally signed in 1996 where the tomato suspension agreement, and that's being scrapped. The agreement prevented tariffs on as long as Mexico exporters adhered to fair pricing and didn't dump on the American market, so they weren't, so they were basically, there was a kind of fair pricing thing, and the deadline is coming up on the 1st of August, and basically US will impose a 30% tariff on all goods, 17% on tomatoes, and this deadline's coming up and doesn't seem to be moving.
But the market is not really reacting to that. Now, the market had a big plunge the other day because Trump had threatened again to get rid of Powell, fire him. And soon as that news came out, the markets went for a big plunge. But the market has not reacted to any of the recent tariff threats.
Yeah,
it did way back in April 1st. It plunged fast and furious.
Yeah, but that's all been back up. We're back up to where we were before the collapse occurred.
Yeah, even better. The market's doing well. And but as you remember, after April 1st, it took a major plunge. This tariff that was irreversible, as Ludnick said, as Trump said, there was going to be no reprieve from that. Well, they had to, because the market plunged. So what's happened in between is market tariff threats that don't come into fruition, and that's where the taco president comes. Trump always chickens out. So the market believes that for whatever reason, whatever negotiation strategy he has, the big tariffs will not hang in.
Yeah, but it's also proven that the market has kind of said, well, we're just going to proceed ahead irrespective of what Trump does.
Yeah, we're just going to do what we're going to do as if none of this has happened.
Yeah.
But Powell, when he tried to get rid of Powell or had a cabinet meeting, so to speak, and they decided it'd be a good idea to get rid of Powell, as soon as the letter was written and he's holding it, stock markets plunged and he had to pull the pin on it again.
Yeah. Yeah, and the interesting thing is about this, so what'll effectively happen is maybe the stocks for the trucking company moving those tomatoes, the actual tomato marketing companies, etc., maybe those will take a hit over the next few days, but they'll settle down and readjust themselves in the next couple of months.
Well, what's interesting here, it is this is how you have to look at it very carefully, because of course the tariff is put on ostensibly to protect American tomato producers.
Yeah.
When 70% of the tomatoes in the United States comes from Mexico, and they put the tariffs on to protect the domestic tomato producers, but at the same time, they're chasing down the workers that work in the tomato fields, a lot of the illegals and other workers who have tenuous rights to stay in the United States. This then makes it look as if like they will not be able to pick up the capacity they need, which forces the United States to buy inflated tomato prices from Mexico, which then goes and affects the consumer.
Yeah.
If the United States was able to pick up the slack and produce the amount of tomatoes it needed to overcome that, then it would be effective. Yeah. But we have this sort of a situation where I'm going to throw out all the laborers that we need to make the tomatoes or pick the tomatoes, at the same time increasing the prices of the tomatoes coming into the country. You might want to do it the other way around in order to motivate people to go into stay in Mexico and grow those tomatoes. And instead of coming into the United States to try to find jobs, you might want to stimulate the tomato market down there just to help with the Mexican economy, so that so many people don't come into the United States looking for jobs if you take away their tomato industry.
Yeah.
or parts of it.
Well, the Democrats are criticizing this because they say tariffs are affecting 50,000 jobs in Arizona and Texas, and at the same time raising grocery prices.
Yeah, so I'm not so sure that he will continue with that tariff. I don't really think the Americans could produce as much tomatoes as they need, since they are dependent on 70% of it. And there's that age-old argument too, like why do you want to put a tariff on a country that supplies you with bananas when you don't make your own bananas?
Yeah.
This has come like with Brazil. Brazil produces the most coffee in the world. The United States is a very small coffee industry in Hawaii, so it cannot fulfill the needs of the American public. So why do you want to put a 50% tariff on Brazil, which will push the coffee up, when you don't have
Brazil, Costa Rica, Guatemala, Sumatra, all of those places that produce coffee.
Yeah, the idea, and bananas. You don't produce meaningful amounts of bananas, so you have to import them. So why do you? Yeah, and I think like people should understand the reason why the United States spends more money than is spent in the United States by a lot of these countries is because of the wealth of the nation. Think of yourself as a person who is much more wealthier than your neighbor. Well, you're going to be buying a car. You're going to be buying you're going to be buying more stuff, and yet you do not have a trade. You have a trade deficit with the appliance company because you buy appliances off them, but they don't buy anything off you. You have a trade deficit with your barber because they cut your hair and they don't buy anything off of you. And the reason why you are buying and spending your money like this is because you have it, and you have a strong you have a strong wherewithal. That's what's overlooked a lot of the times. The reason why the United States spends more than other countries spend it.
Well, and remember this. And remember this also, Dave, in that relationship, that even the poorest person in the United States benefits because of that trade relationship. They get cheap, they get cheap bananas as well.
Yeah, they get reduced prices. So the tomato thing, I think the real situation here is they're trying to get rid of all these farm workers, get rid of them. A lot of them are afraid to come into the farms and work. Farm production is reduced in the United States because of this fear, because their workers are are very afraid to come to work even, which upsets the production in the United States. And then and then you put a slap of tariff on produce that's coming from Mexico, which means that those ostensibly the farm workers there will now, more of them will be out of work because there'll be less tomatoes in demand. And what will they do then? They will be motivated to cross the border and hope to find a better life in the United States. So I don't know what you think you're doing. If anything, they should be putting very strong assurances to guest workers, where like we have here with the Caribbean and Central American people coming to Canada to work certain parts of the year with good wages and good conditions, and they go back to their country. If they had something like that, that would be perfect, because then the people will take the money they earn and take it back to their countries and help build the economy there.
Mike Cushman is saying that it's trumpeting before negotiations. It's his style. It's part of the art of the deal. And he's getting old, right?
Yeah, he's not an honorable man. He'll say, okay, this is what we want from you. And then when you oblige him, he says, no, I want more. And then when you oblige him, he says, oh, I want more. so he isn't setting out the conditions. Look, let's get a win-win deal. He thinks it's a zero-sum game is the best. And plus, he needs a resounding amount of tariff being paid by the American people to make up for the tax cuts. That revenue has to be made up, and the best way to do that is through tariffs, in his mind. So if you reduce the taxes you're putting on the American people, how do you make up that shortfall? Well, you tax them with tariffs instead. Call it something different. So that it's a bad idea all in all. Your foodstuffs and quality food. Tomatoes is an excellent foodstuff. It has lots of vitamin C. It has other things in it. You can use it to make many other things. So it's a healthy foodstuff. And why do you want that to become more expensive for your poorest people? Just think of it. Like, one of the things we talk about here is good food is more expensive. That's why people eat junk, particularly at the poorer levels of our society. Lots of macaroni and lots of cheap things, because quality food is more expensive. Tomatoes and vegetables of all kinds and fruits are a little more expensive. Wealthy people don't care if your tomatoes go up 17%, but the person at the bottom level, the ones that are struggling, that makes a difference. That makes a difference for a family.
Yeah.
So you give tax breaks to the wealthy, and you can say, well, they have to pay 17% more on tomatoes just like everyone else, but they can handle it. The average person, they find that a strength. If anything, you might want to do as a real president is secure quality food coming into the United States at a reasonable price to help your citizens buy foodstuffs that are good, healthy foodstuffs
that is
affordable.
And that, of course, is the irony about placing a tariff on food products, because that's making it more expensive for the average person in America, right?
That's why, yeah. So the tariffs don't hurt the wealthy, but they sure do help hurt the ordinary person.
Yeah, yeah.
So I don't know if this will come up about anymore. Like, Mexico is the real problem because of the fentanyl and the fact that they have powerful cartels, and it's not easy to dismantle those cartels, and they are well armed because of arms shipments that have come from the United States. The part of the fentanyl profit that the cartels make is converted into weapons and sometimes pretty sophisticated systems. Reducing the appetite for fentanyl is really the only thing you can do, because it will get into the country. And the fentanyl pipeline, the materials come from China. Some of them go into the United States and then go into Mexico, get converted to fentanyl, and then come back to the United States. Same thing in Canada. Some of the materials come from the United States into Canada, converted into fentanyl and back. Some of it comes from ports like BC. So it's going to be really hard to zero in on that, particularly because the ingredients for fentanyl are used in all kinds of other pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
It's a difficult process. But right at the very bottom of it, they're saying you're killing our people with fentanyl. Well, your people are taking fentanyl. Why are they taking fentanyl? Why is this huge fentanyl thing going on? Yeah. What is it that drives people to destroy their lives with fentanyl? That is the source of the problem.
Okay, let's move on. Income equality is hitting record highs in her early 25. When I first read this, I thought inequality between male and female. And no, this is basically saying the disposable income gap between the top 40% of Canadian society and the bottom 40% of Canadian society grew by 49% over the last year. The top 20% saw the fastest income growth, benefiting from rising wages and investment, and the bottom 20% experienced the weakest growth, with wages declining by 0.7% and investment income dropping 35%.
Well, this makes perfect sense. It's been predicted for a very long time. And in the article, I think it says that it started to key in on this income inequality back, I think, in 2009. But it hasn't really been seriously taken up since then. What has happened in the West in particular, the money is moving to wealthier hands. So the whole thing is set up so the rich get richer. We know that the standard of living has declined. The standard of living means that the wages don't go as far as they did. So for the bottom 40% of the people who do not have investments and so on, their $20 an hour last year doesn't go as far as their $20 an hour this year, etc. And if they get a raise of $1, inflation puts everything up to $2. So they can't. So what's happening is a strain on the average person. Now, what wealthy people do is they have surplus income, which they then invest.
Yeah.
And when they do that, they attract more money. So their incomes are increasing because, for one thing, they have investments that make them wealthier. Well, the bottom 40% have less resources to do investments. Some may have small investments, some may have RSPs, some may have a university fund for their kids kind of thing, but it would be small in comparison. So those wealthy people who invest, and they then keep reinvesting and making themselves more wealthy, but the average person who is locked in to whatever wages they have find that that's a struggle. So this has been predicted for a very long time, because the system is set up for the wealthy to get wealthier. We talked about the big tax cuts for the wealthy in the United States. That pretty much is all over the Western world, basically, less pronounced in Canada and Europe as it is in the United States. But that whole idea was to make the wealthy wealthy, the richer richer, and hope for trickle down economics, where the wealthy have so much money that they then some of that money percolates down to the average hoi polloi.
Yeah. And that's actually, and the worst of it is, of course, that's been an ongoing cycle as long as I can seemingly remember.
Yes, but it's much more pronounced now because of the sophisticated tax breaks, and we find that somebody like Elon Musk or Bezos don't get salaries. They don't get. They really don't get much of a salary. What they do is have investments, and those capital gains cannot be taxed until they cash those gains in. Well, they never cash them in. They borrow money off of those gains, which is not an income; it's a borrowed money, and basically that's how they beat the tax system.
Yeah.
So they don't really have not only is their wealth less taxed, but there's all kinds of dodges. And we've heard about the Panama Papers, and the Paradise Papers and all that. And we find that wealthy people, even not so super wealthy people like Tony Blair, Putin, Queen Elizabeth, they were all using the tax laws to dodge taxes by moving the money around to different places. They're not doing anything illegal, but the whole system is set up for wealth to the economy to serve the wealthy.
Yeah, and here's the thing: when you plug the hole over here, right, they use another method over here.
Yes, and we find that the banks are not also, just as an aside, the banks have been all too willing to use narco and terrorist dollars to keep the cash flow going.
Yeah.
And they have interest in hiding the sources of money. Those same tricks or legal angles are the same thing that wealthy people. So if you've got Putin, Queen Elizabeth, Tony Blair, and all number of other people using these tax dodges, what kind of tax dodge can you use? What kind of tax dodge can I use?
Yeah, but you've got to be wealthy enough to find them out.
That's right. Like they come on to you like, and we found that Manafort.
Well, and here's
like
the
for instance,
thing.
Manafort, like one of Trump's buddies in the first term, Manafort, when they did the investigations into Russia, which against Trump, which was just a whole pile of rubbish. But what they did do when they started digging, they found Manafort had been dodging taxes with his investments through Ukraine and Russia.
Yeah,
that got overlooked. But it took a microscope of the Mueller investigation to find them when they were looking for something else. And
yeah, but again, here's the thing: those the wealthiest people will think nothing of spending 100,000, 200,000 on hiring an accountant to I wasn't going to say fiddle their taxes, but to nicely sort out their finances, right? And because, can you spend 100,000 on somebody who can nicely sort out your finances? Those people can do everything legally, but if you're on $17 an hour, you can't afford that.
Yeah, it's been going on for quite a while. President Nixon, for one, he was paying the same taxes of a family of four of a moderate income. His when that came up, that his tax rate was extremely low for a man of his wealth. He just said, all I do is hand it over to an accountant and they do it. And that's exactly what he did.
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly what somebody like, and Trump during his first term of office was saying, hey, I don't collect my salary. I put all my the salary that I get as president, it all goes to charity.
Yeah, or go back into the country. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you'd have to find, follow the money to see exactly where it went. But I don't disbelieve him. He takes the salary as a president and distributes it back into the country. One of the few honorable things the dishonorable man does.
Well, there's a lot of argument about whether that does or doesn't happen, but let's take it on face value, right?
Yeah, I don't think he would need the money of what.
Yeah, he doesn't need the money. He gets, and in fact, that salary means nothing to him.
Probably doesn't.
And probably
it would be interesting to know where his salary does go. If it goes to like any kind of Trump charity, well, it might be suspect, or charities of a friend of his. But it would be nice to know, follow that money, and because nobody's really put a microscope to it, we can assume that journalists have had a look at it and find nothing to report.
Yeah. Well, there's been one or two reports, but only one or two. It's not been widespread. All right. Carney is going to curb non-U.S. steel imports.
Yes, this is very, very interesting because steel dumping has been a recurring issue over and over and over again. I remember when I was working in the 90s and Stelco, and while we were having our steel problems with the United States, in that particular case, George Bush was trying to stop imports of steel to bolster the steel industry in the United States at that time, and he picked on Canada when it was covered under NAFTA. it took 4 years to resolve it. Canada won that issue, but in the meantime, it hurt our steel industry.
Yeah.
But Canada at that time and the United States today and the West in general are fighting dumped steel, and there are dodges by which incoming steel, let's say smelted steel from China, comes in various levels of refinement.
Yeah, it's
and
not.
Then
Minimal,
pre-smelted iron comes into Canada, and somebody in Canada smelts it and forms something and says "Made in Canada" on it. That's not true.
because it's not originally Canadian steel, and you know. But again, do they import iron ore?
We've got plenty of iron ore. We've got tons.
Yeah, but no,
it's like everything else. You import the iron ore for where it's most convenient.
Yeah.
Like for instance, we'll get our coal from Pennsylvania because they got great coal. The coal will come probably from Pennsylvania for the blast furnaces. The limestone that they need may come from anywhere, wherever it's cheapest to source it from, whether it's the States or a quarry close by. And the same with iron ore, wherever they're making it cheaper at the time. But the problem here is smelted iron or smelted steel that comes from China and uses a dodge here and there. So they're dumping steel in Canada, and it's very important to put non-U.S. steel products. And the steel industry has been complaining about this over and over and over again for decades. And the steel industry is very relieved by what Carney is doing right now.
Yeah, so basically he's trying to make more Canadian steel, or at least lower the value of the imports. So iron ore is less valuable as an import, than is.
It's not iron ore. It's smelted iron. It's smelted steel. It's not iron ore.
Well, it's the smelted steel that, I'm going to say, but the smelted steel is partially non-Canadian product, right?
Well, that's the problem. The smelted steel is Chinese, comes in, does a little shifty here, shifty there, and they can put "Made in Canada" on it. Where in fact, that smelted steel, and that puts a real pressure on the steel industry that is using the usual means by making steel.
And what he's basically saying is steel imports from countries without free trade agreements, like China and Turkey, will be capped at half of 2024 levels. So they're going to actually cap the importation of steel.
Like when I was working, we got a lot of steel from Brazil for a time. So the irony of it is I'm working in Stelco in the Lake Erie works there, and we're fabbing up stuff to facilitate the production of steel in Stelco, but we're using Brazilian steel. So the flat bar and the angle and stuff like that's come from Brazil. It was cheaper to use Brazilian steel, but this was done it wasn't dump steel, it was traded steel, but it was just thought to be quite an irony that you're using Brazilian steel to make things to help make more Canadian steel. And it's kind of like when I saw the Toyota parts truck a little while ago. I saw the Toyota parts van that goes around and delivers Toyota parts, but the van was a Ford.
But in fact, actually, for example, those courtesy cars that you get for, you take your car into the car dealership, and your courtesy car that drops you home while they're working on your car. Those courtesy cars are typically always the same manufacturer as your dealership, right?
Yeah, that's true. But when it comes to here's just simple, like Toyota does not make that kind of a van, big extended high van, right?
Yeah,
they don't make one.
Yeah, oh,
So
yeah.
what does even Toyota do? They go to someplace that does make what they need.
Yeah, and Ford is that. Ford has always made those kinds of vans, and typically, right throughout the world, when it comes to those small delivery vans that are operating in the city, that contractors use, Ford do them very, very well.
Yeah, it says here, Carney said Canada will implement additional tariffs of 25% on imports from all non-U.S. countries containing steel smelted and poured in China. So that steel that's smelted and poured in China may not come directly from China. It might zigzag its way into Canada. And
Yeah,
that's the real problem, because once it gets in here, it can be deceivingly some sort of technicality can make it look as if it is actually
well, essentially, yeah,
domestically produced steel.
and essentially that is a problem because you're talking about it's been melted and poured in China, so it is a fully viable product at that point, right?
Yeah, so this does not affect our current steel problem with the United States, which is dumb. I think a Ford executive recently told an interviewer, when they were talking about Ford's wherewithal in the car industry today, what kind of advice would you give to the president? Stop tariffing parts and
Yeah,
stop tariffing steel. There you go.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Stop tariffing those things that impact their industry.
So it says here, it shows that China, South Korea, Taiwan, and Mexico are small producers, but after the United States, China is in there. I think that's the one that's hurting the domestic industry the most.
Yeah.
Um,
Hey, I have to say, for example, I didn't realize that Turkey made steel. Doesn't come off to me as being a steel, producing country. But then again, I wouldn't say I know too much about Turkey other than its agricultural produce.
I remember too, steel is a very dirty, environmentally dirty
Yeah,
process. We need huge amounts of it. There are alternatives to using coal, like electric furnaces and stuff, but that needs immense electrical power. So you don't. It is out there, but it's not out there as much, or very much of a difference. Doesn't make much of a difference.
yeah.
So you have to say that if you're going to make steel in Canada and the U.S. and Western Europe would probably make as clean a steel as they can. Whereas a place like Turkey or Brazil, who knows what they're doing?
Well, remember, Turkey wants to get into the European Union, but I don't know whether they've given up on that.
They're kind of aiming more for bricks these days.
Mm, yeah, don't know. Yeah. And anyway.
Anyway, well, in Hamilton, Carney also announced further investments in Canadian steel companies. Remember, Canadian steel production has gone down 30% since this
Yeah.
tariff hoopla
Oh
is
yeah.
happening,
Yeah.
and Trump put the tariffs up to 50%, whereas our counter tariffs to the U.S. steel products remains at 25%. Carney hasn't kicked them up, and until he gets the ear of the president a little bit more and sorts something out. And we have been revealed by, I think the next article in line is the one where Carney says we cannot, it doesn't look like we're going to be able to avoid tariffs from the United States.
Actually, that's interesting because I can't find that article anymore.
Yeah, it may go
disappeared.
back a bit,
It
but because
disappeared.
Carney made an announcement some time ago.
Yeah.
So, like, the Trump administration is in love with tariffs. We know that tariffs are going to be the means by which some of the tax cuts are paid for. And the whole idea, Trump keeps talking about we're going to charge this country 40%, we're going to charge this country this charge. They're not charging the country; they're charging the American consumer.
Yeah.
But it does give the idea that we're putting it to them.
Yeah. That's the whole point about tariffs. It gives the wrong impression because it's actually, if Canada introduces a tariff, that alleged car, the electric car that exists for $10,000 out of China, fully functional, etc., etc. They would have put 100% tariff on it. That means I have to pay $20,000 to get it. May still be a great deal, but again, it impacts me as the potential buyer of it. I don't know anything about that particular car. I just read about it once. It seems to be, hey, maybe I should do that car and leave that car and leave my other one at home.
Yeah. Well, we made the point. Like, let's say Lesotho sells industrial diamonds to the United States. Yeah. There's a huge tariff put on tiny little Lesotho because there's a trade imbalance. It's because Lesotho can't afford anything U.S. makes. And you take these industrial diamonds and now have a 40% tariff on them, and it goes into mining and drilling equipment that makes mining and drilling more expensive.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. All of these tariffs have a knock-on effect. And it also, every time you make something more expensive, there's a potential that you impact a job.
That's the real problem. So the idea of attracting more industry in the United States by using tariffs, that will work somewhat over the long term. But you're never going to get shoes being built in the United States again, unless you come up with a computer system, which is a fully automated factory where somebody takes a picture of your foot or analyzes your foot, sends it into the computer, and spits out a pair of shoes for you.
Actually, that kind of thing does exist. I was talking to a company. They actually they were talking about orthotic inserts for shoes, right? So they know the shoe that you've got, and because you kind of bring that along to your appointment, they scan your foot. You put your foot in a box, they scan your foot and how you stand in various positions, right? And that's laser accurate scanning.
I've already gone through that. So it's not like a computer that can fix it. I'm talking about a shoe that fits you directly.
Yeah.
You put your foot in the box, it analyzes your weight, your foot size, the step in your foot and everything, and puts out a perfect, complete shoe for you.
I could see that happening.
That could happen. But until that happens and it becomes cheap, you're not going to bring the shoe industry back to the United States. No, because the wages required to make an inexpensive shoe requires inexpensive labor.
Yeah. Yeah. I could see that happening and it all being computerized, because what would happen is it would turn that laser thing into the cutting of the soles, laser-based cutting of the soles, trimming the leather to a particular size, and how it's stitched into place is especially for you. Trouble is, you and I might have the same shoe size, but I could never wear your shoe.
Yes, because they're way too stylish for you. But we're talking about something like 3D printing and stuff like that. But until, let's get right back to that though. But until that happens, until some sort of situation happens where it becomes fully automated, you're not going to be able to make shoes in the West that are affordable. You can make them, but they won't be affordable. You might be buying them for $300 instead of $100. And so that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
When Lutnick talked about bringing phone production and other things back into the United States, that's what he was talking about. He was talking about fully automated means by which to make a phone rather than labor-intensive ways that they are now. But that investment would be huge. So the whole thing is a real topsy-turvy thing. But any case, steel is essential. Steel is old-fashioned. People have been making steel since it began in the Iron Age, and a thousand years before Christ, even longer than that. But the Iron Age really kicked in around about 900 BC, and we haven't stopped making steel ever since, and we're not going to, because it is a very strong material. Buildings, framework, everything requires steel, and it's an ancient process. I mean, the Bessemer process is over 200 years old now. So you know what I mean? So any country with elemental industrial process can make a steel mill.
Yeah,
and that's the biggest problem.
Yeah. And that's actually the interesting thing about it, because it's surprising. It's not exactly what you would call cutting edge technology. It's been part of humanity for at least 200 years, and anybody can do it. You only need high school understanding to go there, right? To make it.
Yeah, this all started in Britain, where they refined and reduced by massive amounts the cost of making steel. So let's start in Britain, and right now we're still waiting for their next best idea. They haven't had one yet.
Well, where's the steel industry in Sheffield now? It doesn't even exist.
Yeah, exactly. Because everybody can make steel. So it's always going to be an issue of steel being dumped, because each country thinks that it is essential to have a steel industry. However, if you don't have any place to put that steel, how do you keep your industry going? What you do is you sell it cheap everywhere around the world just to keep your steel industry alive. And that's what's happening with China dumping steel. It used to be Japan that was dumping steel, and Korea and Brazil and those places dumping steel. They don't do that anymore, but China does. And it will always be a problem for Canadian steel manufacturer because of this, because of how they get around the law. They were dumping in Canada and the United States by first bringing it into to Canada and making it look as if it was a NAFTA item moving across into the United States. That's what the Japanese did, and the Germans too, I think. That's what they did. They brought in steel into Canada, made it look as if it was a NAFTA import into the U.S. It looked good. It looked good because there was a loophole in the law. And so first of all, Canada got steel that it didn't need at a much cheaper price, and then any surplus would then go in the United States. And it went the other way as well.
I'm going to ask you a question, Dave, because at one point, I distinctly remember a lot of the steel industry saying that, hey, something like, and I'm going to put a figure, 75% of steel comes from recycled steel, not freshly manufactured steel from iron ore.
I don't know if that number is accurate.
Is that ever the case?
I suppose in certain mills maybe that is, but all I know is when I worked at the steel mills, and anytime I was around the blast furnace and the big vessel in which they load up the big vessel with scrap and other ingredients like molybdenum and copper and stuff like that. They put it at the bottom of the vessel. Then they come in with their smelted iron that comes in from the BOF, basic oxygen furnace, and then they come in and these huge, gigantic ladles pour the molten iron into the vessel, where in the vessel there are these ingredients, including a lot of scrap. So they coat the bottom of the vessel with scrap, then they add new iron. Okay, and then they blast it all. They put the basic oxygen to it. It's quite a process, man. It looks.
Yeah. No, I get it. And hey, I'm not. I've seen those processes on documentaries and things, and yes, they are impressive. But there's a lot of difference between seeing them and hearing about them in theory and being up front in the steel production line. Never been there.
Yeah,
Never
you'll
wanted,
see.
never
Like
wanted to either, but
one time I was in Stelco, and there was the big scrap heap which they loaded up, and it looked as if it was all made up. In this particular pile is made up of cans, like fruit and vegetable cans, the kind of
yeah,
cans you buy at your store, tomato cans,
yeah,
all that. That's what it looked like. The bulk of it was.
and probably all crushed into a nice, succinct. But presumably things like, things like crushed cars and things like that would all be part of it.
Well, you'll get a cube
Yeah,
of metal that's come from the scrap dealers,
yeah.
where they just cube it, and it could be made up of anything, any kind of scrap steel, and they just kind of bound it all together, and then you might drop one of them into the.
Yeah, the only limitation is that it has to be steel, can't include aluminium and other metals.
Oh, if it does, then they'll be able to get rid of that. Like they'll smelt they won't. You need a certain amount of aluminum, molybdenum, and copper as part of the alloy. So if it does contain aluminum, they'll want to take that aluminum off, because aluminum costs a lot more.
Yeah.
So they'll separate it out.
Oh yeah. That's what I'm saying is, the scrap dealers have actually separated that stuff, pre-separated it.
We'll try to, yeah.
Yeah, well, mainly anyway.
Yeah.
Small amounts of zinc or aluminium won't actually make a great deal of difference in the smelting process. I know that.
Well, they have their recipe. Stelco as a highly guarded recipe.
Yeah.
And each company does. But anyway, aside from that, we're trying to close up the door, and it's not U.S. steel that we're worried about in this particular case. It's dumping of steel from tricky old China, basically.
But again, Carney, we were talking about Carney saying we would have to accept some tariffs anyway.
He was mentioning that from the United States, not about this article.
No, not about the non-U.S. product, but we're going to get to a point. What he was saying was we're going to get to a point when it comes to many things with the U.S. where we're going to have to accept that there's a certain level of tariffs applied.
Yeah, it seems that we just mentioned that a little while ago, that the administration needs those tariffs. The U.S. administration needs tariffs to pay off their to pay for their tax cuts, and that's just it. And we won't be able to avoid those tariffs. Now the question is, do we tariff back? If it's going to hurt our industry to tariff back, we shouldn't do it.
Yeah,
that's basically it. If the tariffs are sustainable and will not impede our marketing in the United States, if they put, let's say they've put 10% tariffs on Canadian oil, well, the Americans are still buying it.
Yeah,
that's not instantly producing another well in the United States to compete with that Canadian oil.
Yeah, but again, importation of U.S. or Canadian oil going up by 10%. When it comes down to the production of the basic, the commodities we use in the car, like the production of gasoline, then that not necessarily 10% more expensive than it was.
Potash is another one. So they know that they need Canadian potash. They know they need Canadian oil.
Yeah.
How do you then tariff it, where you're still making tariff money off it, but you're not really pushing the price up too high. So what they've done is so potash is something they cannot produce. So the tariff levels on that are low. Yeah. But the idea that they're putting tariffs on aluminum, steel, nickel, and well, maybe not nickel, but I think it was nickel too. But anyway, copper is supposed to stimulate the domestic mining industry to make it itself and to shut out the competition from other countries.
Yeah,
that will work in the long run, but until you bring up that capacity, it won't work. And now, there is some argument in the United States that by tariffing Canadian steel, that will ramp up production in U.S. steel.
Yeah.
That did work for a short time during Trump's last term. But what happens is there's a point where it just doesn't work anymore because because the market can't respond and so on. And what you do is you get the same old thing all over again, where you start importing steel that you would rather not make and exporting steel that you do want to make.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. Moving. No, there's not really anything to move on to. Anything else about tariffs, and what was the other one you were talking about?
We talked about I mentioned yesterday about, we're already 8:01. Maybe we can bring it up tomorrow because it's kind of a neat discussion. Yesterday, I talked about the ultra-Jewish, ultra-Orthodox Jewish political parties in Israel refusing, pulling out of Netanyahu's government because they're refusing to do military service.
Yeah, I don't know.
We'll bring it up. It'll take too long to talk about.
Yeah.
Just a couple of minutes.
Don't know you sent me anything on that.
Yeah, we talked about it yesterday.
Oh.
We talked about it yesterday near the end of the show.
Okay, and I don't. It's seemingly that I don't actually have. I don't know what has happened. I've only got everything since 6 o'clock yesterday.
Well,
on my feed,
you will find you. I'll resend it to you. It's a very small prompt, though. It's not like the big ones like you normally see. It's just a tiny. It's a small.
Yeah, I know, but I'd be grateful because for whatever reason, my and it hasn't done it with anybody else, but it's just my connection to you seems to have reset itself on my on this computer. Weird, eh?
I'll send it to you right now.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And I think we can kind of wrap that up at that point. I got some new people. I got some students I'm going to be helping over the next 2 months who are doing placements at our firm.
Oh, God help the students.
No, actually,
that's a good thing. That's a very good thing. It gives them job
I like the idea. I am very much in favor of giving students the opportunity, and in fact, actually, I have found that some of the best people we've actually had through our firm have been students who did placements at our firm.
Do you call them grasshopper?
No, they could. Anyway, we're not going there.
Okay. Without further ado, I bid you do not forget about Gaza. It's becoming worse every day. It's going to be a concentration camp. The actions of the Israeli government and the IDF are resembling more and more those of the gulags, Stalin's gulags, and the fascist concentration camps. It's just loathsome, and I don't really see an end of it coming soon. But I'll put this out there, Donald J. Trump. If you want the Nobel Peace Prize, that's the area you want to concentrate on.
End that war, yeah. End that conflict, yeah. All right.